And up next, we have a panel presentation on how to break the news in ALS MND. So please welcome Dr. Angela Genge, Dr. Colleen O'Connell, Dr. Melinda Kavanaugh, and Kathy Cummings. And while they come up, I have a new thing to add to that this is like a welcoming friends group, and now I can say it's also the cool kids table. Nice.
We have a microphone. I will get that for you. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of the International Alliance and very privileged to be the moderator for this session with these three superstars on the stage. I'm sure you're all familiar with the term imposter syndrome, and I'm feeling that big time right now sitting beside these three. So I just want to give you an idea about this program before we get started, and I'm just going to also start my timer so that we make sure we stay on time, because we don't want Sarah giving us the hook. This program, the genesis of it was a discussion between Mark Massey from MT Pharma Canada and Dr. Angela Genge, who had a conversation about breaking the news in the ALS community. And for those of you that were here for ALS MND Connect yesterday, you heard Professor Orla Hardiman speak about this. She almost did a plug for this program. We did not set her up. And she said one of the things that is most challenging is clinicians and allied health professionals don't get taught a lot about breaking the news and how to communicate, and that there's an opportunity gap in our community for this type of program. And so that was, as I said, not a setup. It was like she was doing a trailer for this, though, and that harkens back to the conversation that Mark and Dr. Genge had about the need for this type of program. And so this is a bit of an unusual panel presentation in that we could have gone two ways. The program itself is designed to be 90 minutes long, but we knew we didn't have that much time in the program here at the APF to do the full program. But the program is available for you to use, and it's got speaker notes and handouts. You'll see that these are on your table. So what we're doing today is explaining the context and doing an abridged version or a condensed version of the program. So just as an example, there are a number of videos available in the program to support the learning outcomes, but we're only going to show you two of those today. But know that they're there. So this part of the program has homework. When you get home, I want you to go to the website that has been created. It will be housed on the Alliance website shortly as well. And look at all the materials, look at the videos, and use them within your teams and your environments when you get back home. Let me just advance the slides. We have, as I said, superstar faculty here today. I am definitely not going to go through their bios because it would take the rest of our allotted time on the program. But immediately to my left, we have Dr. Melinda Kavanaugh from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Dr. Colleen O'Connell from Fredericton, New Brunswick, and Dr. Angela Genge from Montreal, Canada, Montreal, Quebec. Without further ado, we'll get through the program. I do just want to mention our disclosures. Mine are quite small listed on there. I've listed every sponsor of this conference, and everyone else's are listed on there. And I do want to say not only a disclosure, but a special thank you to MT Pharma Canada for helping develop this program, which they have no ownership of. They're giving it to the community to be used in whatever way makes sense. And we will be doing this program in its full length at a number of different venues over the next year, but we wanted to just give you a taste of the program here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Genge to begin, and I will bring her the clicker.
Thank you very much, Kathy. So my plug is we'll travel anywhere to present this together. So if you want to invite us, we'll figure out how to see you. And we prefer warm places. So invite us in your summer. That's all I ask. Okay. So we actually removed one word, and we changed it to breaking the news. As opposed to breaking bad news. It's actually based on a couple of one very important publication that goes back many years from an oncologist named Dr. Buckman. And you'll get the detail as we present, but one of the things that really came back in our internal feedback is the news. We don't need to put in bad. It's enough already. That's not exactly what's written on the slide. I'm just telling you as it is, as usual. And we feel that this is a much better way of presenting, even the program is calling it Breaking the News. Their learning objectives, quickly, it's really how to look at delivering this news. It is really for all healthcare professionals, and I'll fill in a little bit later on how we do it. It's also to make everyone in this room and everyone who listens reflect on their own biases. That's really important here. Determining your own best practices and ability to apply them and respond to the distress of giving the news. So it's really ALS spikes technique. And we'll be going over a little bit of the detail. The videos are phenomenal. We're really trying to adhere to time. I believe we start 10 minutes late, so we're going 10 minutes over, so I'm just letting you know that now. I'm going to share with you my very quick vignette. So it is actually, it really is that Mark came into my office and said, look, we need to be sharing this news with patients with ALS better than we're doing. And he has worked in the neurology field for a long time. And we took it up and then said, oh, I need this and this and this person involved. So you see the people involved. I personally believe it needs to be based with the Alliance, but my history of entry into ALS is completely around telling people that they had the diagnosis. Because way back when I was training, I could have easily gone into muscle disease. That was what my fellowship was about. I'm originally a physio, did neurology. I was heading towards neuromuscular. And my mentor could tell anyone their child had Duchenne. He could tell no one that they had ALS. So we'd go in a room as a fellow. You're the little person who comes behind the big expert. It's really quite a medical tradition. And he would say, you don't have this and this and this, and he'd leave the room. And I was left to tell them what they had. There's not a lot of training in medical school in 1986 on how to do this, so it really was a career-defining moment to be the one telling these people. And I can tell you many, many stories. I won't go into it. But that's really the genesis of this program. So we really do want to help anyone who's interested. It's not confined to ALS, but this is really ALS-focused. I can see it being used in almost any neurodegenerative disease because there's some other bad diagnoses out there. So away we go. Do we have this video?
We do have this video, and I want to recognize both that Allison is here in the room, and thank you for letting us share this video, and also your ALS guide is here in this room, so again, a thank you to them.
Who does the video?
The first neurologist we went to, I think, just didn't want to say the words. I think that's a really hard thing to tell people. for a lot of neurologists. So he actually sat us at his desk, and he had a printer on his desk, and he started printing out information about neurological disorders and told us to go home and read it. And like, we've read that. We knew what we were dealing with. We knew what the tests were representing. And so we got handed to an ALS neurologist who came in, looked at all our paperwork, and very quickly said, "Yep, I'm sorry, you have the worst disease known to man today. You're probably going to live about 2 years. Go get your affairs in order." And he literally stood up from behind his desk and walked out of the room. And we sat there by ourselves to figure out. And eventually Jeff left the room, and I didn't know. I didn't know if I was supposed to leave. I didn't know if somebody was going to come talk to me. And the nurse came in and handed me the card of the ALS Association and told us to call them. So it was a very lonely process for me to walk. I remember walking out of that doctor's office and going down in the elevator, trying to process, holding this card in my hand that was going to give us the answers that we needed, and having to face Jeff at the bottom of the elevator. And it was just part of the tragedy is how that whole diagnosis happens for people. I'm sure there's never a good way, but there are definitely worse ways.
Thank you, Allison. So, bad news is any news that seriously and adversely affects patients' view of his or her future. This was Dr. Buckman's motivation. He was an oncologist. However, the task of breaking bad news is a testing ground for all of us. It requires the entire range of our professional skills and our abilities. And if we do it badly, we rupture that relationship, that professional-patient relationship permanently. If we do it well, we are part of the journey. And it's as simple as that. So I'm handing this over now to my colleague to my right, and then you're going to get a flavor of each of the components of the program.
So you've heard already some of from Allison, her experiences around receiving that diagnosis. And while it's hard to make excuses for any of these poor deliveries and negative experiences, we do recognize that all of us as healthcare professionals struggle to deliver news that we do not wish to give, that we wish we had better news. We deal with things such as strong emotions, anxiety. We feel that burden of that responsibility. Part of the reason is that we're fearful, or we don't want that negative and awful type of experience for the patient and for the caregiver. So what happens is we tend to skirt around it, or may not be as forthcoming or provide all of the information that is really required. And that leads to this condition, what we call sort of the mum effect, where we don't really give the diagnosis. This can lead to then delays in diagnosis, like we've heard. It can lead to lack of appropriate and timely information that patients and their caregivers so need and deserve. And that can have negative implications for actually the care of the individual. So there's some very unique challenges to delivering news in ALS. One thing that sets this apart from other diagnoses is that it's not just that first delivery. The progression of the disease causes frequent points in time or continuous time where there's changes and crossroads and progression of the disease, that there's another series of grief and having to then present, well, there's another change in your condition and we have to make decisions. So it's this continuous cycle of having to find ways to deliver news and to validate some of those experiences the person is having. What's also really important is to recognize that it's all members of the care team that have to be involved in this, and that every patient is in fact very unique. Because it's a heterogeneous condition, there's no one way or one sort of package of information. And so it's the process of delivering the news that becomes extremely important. So we know also that the way in which a diagnosis is delivered, and you heard from Allison, it's not just the content, but it's the mechanism and the manner in which this information is delivered that can be a problem. We know from various surveys that have been conducted that half of patients are very dissatisfied with the manner in which the diagnosis has been communicated. There is a lack of information being provided at that initial visit and as well through the continuum. And sadly, more than half had questions that arose immediately after that delivery of the diagnosis, immediately, and these concerns were not addressed. So there is good news, and that is kind of why we're all here today. We're so excited about this program. Delivering difficult news is a skill. It's a clinical skill like any other that any one of us has learned through our healthcare training. There is a process, and understanding that process as well as your own biases, which Melinda is really going to talk a lot about, helps us. If you have an intentional and stepwise process, and we're going to present a process for you, and use those well-established principles of communication, we can improve how we deliver that news. That will have immediate and definite positive impacts on the quality of life of your patient and caregiver, as well as yourself. It helps reduce the stress and the burden, and we know that people who have those skills and feel confident in those skills have reduced anxiety and reduced stress. So this is better for the health of all of our team, inclusive of the multidisciplinary team and inclusive of the patient and caregiver. So there are a number of different processes that have been published in the literature. The one that we've chosen to focus on and present to you in this educational toolkit is ALS spikes. It's developed from the spikes protocol that was used for oncology patients, but it's been well informed by best practice recommendations of the European Federation of the Neurologic Societies, as well as the Canadian best practice recommendations. And it is very intentional for a series that goes through, and we'll go through each of these steps: advanced preparation, location, setting, patient perceptions, invitation, knowledge, empathy and emotions, strategy, and summary. What's very nice about this is it can be used at that initial diagnosis and can also be used throughout the disease trajectory and can be used by any member of the healthcare team. Clicker. I keep the mic. The clicker.
Okay. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this slide because every single one of us in this room understands that it is not simply the person living with ALS who receives this diagnosis and lives with the diagnosis, but it's absolutely their caregiver, their family, their friends. I so appreciate what our colleagues in Canada said earlier, that family aren't always caregivers and caregivers aren't always family. So it's important for us to really kind of situate ourselves and this process within this whole setting of who all is part of this diagnosis and following time after the diagnosis. So when we think about the advanced preparation, there are certainly some things we can do as clinicians, as healthcare providers, as allied health professionals to make sure that we are prepared to know who's coming into our office. Who are they? What is their history? What are their needs? What have been their past experiences with healthcare providers? That is critical that we're giving ourselves that advanced preparation, that advanced information, that advanced knowledge. But at the same time, that advanced preparation also includes who we are as practitioners. Who are we and what do we know and what are our biases and what are our understandings, expectations around death, dying, diagnosis, living with a disease like ALS. And so it is critical that you spend this time doing something that we have coined Know Thyself. And we have an actual exercise, and there's a video that follows where I spend a whole lot of time really digging in and helping you kind of walk through this process. But it is critical before anybody walks in your door that you look at what your biases are and you check them at the door, right? And social work, that's a huge pillar. We train our students immediately. What are your biases? Check them at the door. But you can't check them at the door unless you've spent that time, unless you have really sat with that uncomfortable, what would I do? How would I feel? Because whether we understand it or acknowledge it, those things seep through. And that's where that mom effect comes in, when I haven't really grasped how I feel about these things. So, we encourage these exercises. Take a minute, just sit with it, write things down. What might be a way that these biases in your own self influence these diagnoses? The second, more kind of intensive level is a mindfulness exercise. So I'm a big proponent of mindfulness in my everyday life, in my clinical practice, in my research, and it is extraordinary to be able to go through an exercise like this. And it doesn't have to be at the point of diagnosis if you are in the room with the diagnosis. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of my amazing fellow allied health professionals out there as you go about your clinical practice, when you're going into home visits, when you know that you are going to be engaging with families who have maybe been living with some real struggles around their life around ALS, right? So this exercise was adapted really from some wonderful work. Kathleen Kareen at Emory Palliative Care, shout out to her. One of my very favorite statements that she says, and I got to get it right because it kills me. Get your mind right and fix your face. Right? I mean, that's straight up. First of all, she's from the South, so woohoo. But it's true. Get your mind right. So we spend time on this exercise. Oh, whoops, I just skipped. My apologies. I skipped a slide. But the exercise is in there. The video is in there. Take the time to walk through that process. We give you all of the details. Oh, did they move it back? Or I didn't move it back. Yes, so I don't need to spend more time on that. I think I move it to. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. We literally rehearsed, but you can blame me. I'm the only American on this Canadian stage. So take that time. And also before you go into the room, and we're going to talk about this later, a lot of times the diagnosis is given simply straight up with the neurologist and the family and the individual. But depending on the way your clinic is structured, you might be a participant in that diagnosis being given. So it's also really important for you to take that time to mentally rehearse, not just the physician, not just the nurse, not just the social worker, whoever's involved. Practice out loud. What are some of the things that you would say? How would you respond? What are some of your immediate responses to this initial diagnosis and potential meeting with the family afterward?
So this is a little bit, we're going to the next step, which is location and setting. It's almost like a real estate commercial. Location, location, location. This is hugely important. You want to know in advance, have the room set up that's in an appropriate setting for being able to accommodate the family members that are coming, that there's no barriers in front of you. There's nothing worse than somebody delivering news that's behind a desk with a big computer screen in front of them and you can't even see their face. You have to prepare for the small things, like ensuring you have things like tissues nearby, that there's a way that you know that you're not going to be interrupted repeatedly. You're not taking beeper calls, you're not having your cell phone and looking at your watch. So you need to have that time established. This is really important. This is that first time that you are establishing that rapport with the individual, and that relationship needs to last throughout the entire thing. As you're working through this program, perhaps you're doing this with your own multidisciplinary team. This would be a really good time when you're going through these steps to think about your own environment. Are we using the best room in our building? Is there a way that we could have a different type of location? What kind of things do we find interrupt ourselves? One of the things that we had at our center was we have a set-aside time, which is our day for new referrals, and it just happened to coincide with when our maintenance did the monthly fire drills. And so always we'd be right in the middle, and all of a sudden the fire drill would start going, which we're supposed to evacuate and go out into the hallway, which I constantly ignored, but would get in trouble then with maintenance for not following the rules. So we had to have a process then where we worked with maintenance to say, there are no fire drills on this particular day when we have a patient booked. And so things like that. So this is a good chance to meet with your teams to talk about some of these issues. So the other thing, the next step is the patient perception. This is really important. We talked about the advanced planning, and so knowing your patient's history, the information that's coming along with them. You also need to know very early on what they understand already. So then you are able to tailor the discussion and be able to provide the information that is appropriate to that individual as well as their family. And you can use some probing questions to help you along with that. For example, starting off with, well, what do you think might be wrong? What is your understanding of why you're here to see us today? What information did your last doctor tell you about the visit coming in here today? This information really helps you set the stage. It's a very different conversation and perhaps a very different approach. If you have an individual who's coming who has who has a familial type of motor neuron disease and is coming to you already with the list of all the different trials they've sourced out on clinicaltrials.gov and says, how do I get in these? Versus somebody who says, well, I'm here to see you because I think I have a pinched nerve. Those are two very different types of conversations, so it's important to try and feel this out early in the conversation, right at the beginning, because that helps tailor throughout. And then you want to have the invitation. Any of you that work in sort of sex therapy or sexual conversations, you always have to have that permission step, right? This is kind of similar. It's the invitation, and you can be very, very forthright with this. How much information would you like me to provide you today? How much do you want to do this all today? Do you feel like we need to have another appointment fairly soon? Invite to find out how much information they would like to know, and it's okay if they don't want to know everything on that visit. But you need to then set the plan for how you're going to move forward. And I had one individual who, this is just an example, he had a real problem with the word disease or disorder. And he said, can you please call this a condition? And I strove to do that. I sometimes slipped up, but he was very much that you can tell me anything, I just don't call it a disease. And so you respect that and move forward. Oops. I didn't know there were little flash ups. There we go. So on to Dr. Genge.
Thanks, Colleen. So then I'm going to see if my flash-ups can come up quickly. There we go. Then it's really what you actually say. We have a number of things that happen when we see a patient. And I can't tell you that I have the ideal clinic set up. It's not terrible. It's not great. We make it work. But really, the next step is what knowledge and how you transfer that knowledge to the patient and the caregiver. Google has provided something very unique that wasn't around in the past. Patients Google me because there are a lot of neurologists in Montreal that won't give the diagnosis. They send the patient, and the patient and the leading statement, and it's a very dear friend of mine at the Jewish used to do this. I'm going to send you to a lovely lady. That's her name is Dr. Genge. She'll take care of you. And so they Google. I have a very intense population. One part of my population is very intense, and the other is very laid back. So we're multi-ethnic in Montreal. And they Google, and the intense ones were on the phone within a half an hour asking for appointment yesterday. And the laid-back ones would just show up and say, oh, you're the nice lady who's going to take care of me. So I had to turn both of those situations into a knowledge transfer. And so knowledge transfer is key. You have to know, part of this whole breaking the news is learning how to determine what they want to know. Pause often is a really part of the mantra, but it really is important. You start with the diagnosis. You may have to use 3 or 4 different ways of naming the condition, as Colleen says. And you have to understand what they're absorbing. And remember, the caregiver or accompanying person may be absorbing something completely different than the patient. You have to understand their educational level. When I'm talking to a university professor, it's very different than a construction worker that has a grade 3 education. And his main issue is, do I go back to work or not? So you have to do, it's a dialogue. It's not a statement of fact, it's a dialogue. It's knowledge transfer in a dialogue. And you need to acknowledge that this is devastating. There are lots of ways to acknowledge devastating disease without telling you to get your affairs in order. And I actually think that statement should be lost, wiped from the vocabulary of neurologists delivering news like this. Because there are reasons that what you read on the internet is outdated. There has been movement forward. Everyone in this room is part of that movement. And so hope is an issue, is a concept in ALS. And the idea of clinical trials and access and the fact that, as you know, everyone should be offered one is a part of that process. The other thing that is important about the hope part, which as you can imagine, the doc that Allison met doesn't understand the concept of hope. But hope is a number of things. Hope is in saying we have a team that's going to support you. We're going to plan ahead for you so you're never left in the lurch, not having what you need when you need it. You are going to be offered all the clinical trial and clinical research projects that are available. And if we don't run it in Montreal, and that's really the one you want to be in, for whatever reason, we'll find a location for you to go to be a part of that trial. Even with all the trials we have, we don't have them all. So we do that level, but we really focus on hope. And there is a big connection between hope and helplessness. So there have been papers over the years about hope and hopeless and hopeful. And my team actually did this in the past, looked at what drove that sense of hope in patients. And the number one thing is being needed. So we're all part of the team that supports them. They have to feel that they're needed in their community still. They're valued. So whatever way you express hope, you need to be able to reinforce that they are of value to their friends, family, and community. That's a huge piece of this. So be prepared to to answer the tough questions right from the beginning. When am I going to die? How long do I have? How am I going to die? All of these actually are woven into hope, and in the webinar or in the program, this should really be fleshed out. People have fears. They have fears that they're going to suffocate or choke to death if they know anything about ALS. They have fears that they're going to be abandoned. But the most common fear that my patients express is, I don't want to be around when I can no longer wipe my bum. There is a sense of loss of independence, and that's part of what we have to deal with in our knowledge transfer. Don't be afraid to say there's lots of new ways of treating things. You will not be put in that position if we can work together. The last thing I want to say before I hand it over is to make sure that this discussion continues. It's continuous. I'm reinforcing what Colleen already said, but the information at the beginning in the first or second visit is currently approved drugs and treatments and therapies. More explanation about the disease. Expect, though, that you will have to repeat this multiple times and it will change over time. introduce them early to their patient support and advocacy groups, and let them know about the research and point them in the direction of good websites so that they're not reading nonsense. So part of knowledge is pointing the patients and their caregivers to sources of information that are actually solid. They will look for information, so give them the right tools and not allow them to drift into the wrong tools. The other thing which I think is really important is if your patient is not first language English or whatever your first language is, do your very best to incorporate someone on your team that can communicate with them in their first language. Sounds little, but it's huge. We've had a huge effect. And we bring in, well, first of all, the team speaks 6 or 7 different languages. So we just have that built into our multidisciplinary team. But most hospitals have translators or people who can come to clinic. Get the information to them in the language they understand. Make sure things are booked in advance. Make sure when they leave the clinic, their next visit is there. Make sure they are not overwhelmed in this first visit. But I must say that I use everyone in clinic to help with this discussion, because the patients come and they see everybody in clinic. We may filter that on the first 2 visits, but we really use the entire team to cover the knowledge. It's not just me. And what we have found, as I hand the clicker over to Melinda, what we have found is that patients and their families pick a favorite. They pick a favorite person in the multidisciplinary team that is their go-to for all their struggles. And that favorite is not necessarily the neurologist. And in the case of Allison, it would never be the neurologist. That favorite may be the RT, the respiratory therapist. It may be the secretary or admin. It's more often the nurse, the social worker, the PT, or the OT, but it's not exclusive. So remember that any one of you or any one of your team could be that confidant. So the communication amongst the team after you've given the diagnosis is almost as important as what you give. Over to you.
Well said. Could not agree more. I'm going to click through my little bubbles as well. So this is such a critical piece, and this is the piece that so often our family members and our caregivers are very often looking for, whether it's at that point of diagnosis, whether it's the next visit, whether it's in the weeks to come. It really is so critical for us to be able to sit with those emotions, right? We've done our work. We have known thyself. We have done some mindfulness exercises so that we have a really good sense of where we are coming from. So now we can respond with a real sense of empathic responses, where we're not showing, deep emotion, but we're being very empathetic to our patients and our family members. And we go through steps of saying, here are suggested responses, right? So there's going to be lots of emotion. There's going to be lots of shock. So it's very important that we ask, how are you feeling? What is it that I can do at this moment to support you? Because we know that there is the absolute roller coaster. There's the massive continuum of emotions. I'm sure that most of us, certainly all of us on this stage, have been in the room, have been part of that actual diagnosis giving. And it can be overwhelming for everybody in the room. But we want to be able to have them walk through and identify what is that source of emotion. Is it actually the diagnosis, or are they already thinking weeks, months, years in advance. Are they thinking about their children? Are they thinking about their job, their, financial support? So what we want to do is be able to really situate with them, what can we do to support you at this moment? And this is also where it's so critical, as Angela just said, not only have they kind of identified their person, but who else is part of your team, whether it's you in the room, other folks who can really come in and be a part of that process. Like I said, sometimes the diagnosis is only with the neurologist, but if you're in one of these clinics where the diagnosis is delivered in a team, right, to where there are multiple people in the room, who's part of that? Who can be a supportive person in that context? I knew that. So there are lots of things that we want to make sure we do, and the most important thing on this slide I want to highlight is to be okay with silence. As a species, humans get very awkward in these settings, particularly in very heightened emotions. Let them really take the lead. Let the patient, let the person with the illness, let the family member, let the caregiver, let whoever there is with you really set that stage for it's okay to listen in silence. It's okay to let them process it. And we can have some very, very clear, I'm here for you. I want to be able to support you in any way that is possible. And it's really important that we're situating this in the diagnosis, but knowing who all is in this room and knowing how all of you do so much work after the diagnosis and the days and the weeks and the months, this is a really important opportunity for you to take this idea of managing these overwhelming emotions in the weeks ahead. Because you might be doing a home visit and there might be a point where the family really kind of opens up and expresses some of their fears, some of their concerns. So that's where you say, do you need some time? Do you want to be alone with this? What can I do for you? Do you need some silence? Would you like me to bring in other individuals who are part of my ALS team? Do we need to arrange for a different clinic visit? Do we need to have more home visits? What is it? And it's really attending to those emotions, which we all know are absolutely up and down and all over, given any given day of the week. I know. I am excelling at this, aren't I? Yes.
Okay. So we're practicing handing the clickers. It's hilarious. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but I'm going to say there's a lot of do nots. And this is really important. You have to be able to talk to them and deliver this message in a place that's safe. You have to know that you may not know how they're feeling. You don't know this person yet. You're going to know them really well, but you don't know them yet. So you don't know what they're feeling. You don't know if they're already planning medical aid and dying the minute you give the message. You just don't know. You don't know if they know about ALS, MND. You assume that if it's a familial form, they do, but people have a tremendous capacity to deny. And in the same family, you can have two children of a parent that you took care of who died of ALS, who have completely different knowledge bases. One went into a complete pit of, I'm never going there, and the other has been for 20 years researching how to prevent themselves from getting ALS. So you don't know. You think, but you don't know. Deliver without emotion. This is impossible to deliver without emotion. For those of you who don't know, I'm not only direct, but I'm a hugger. So I often end up hugging a patient or a caregiver very early in this conversation after I've talked about it. Emotion is a part of human beings. It's part of us as professionals. So don't deny your own emotion about this. Don't talk over the patient. I'm going to say listen again. Don't talk over them. they're going to say, but, there's another extreme level of denial, and that's the ones who run around the world finding the cause of their disease so that it's not ALS. Those are the heartbreaks for me, because they don't take part in what we can do for them while they're running around looking for their crazy solutions. Don't assume anything, and don't abandon them at the end of the discussion. I have a phenomenal team, and these patients who've just gotten their diagnosis never go and sit in the waiting room for half an hour waiting for the next person. We make sure that they are picked up and carried throughout the team. Our spiritual care person who actually leads our mindfulness, she's also a counselor. She actually sits in our waiting room. That's where she spends her clinic day. She goes into rooms for private conversation, but she spends her clinic day sitting in the waiting room with the ALS Quebec person, just watching, talking to who wants to be spoken with. But she's watching. She's reading the waiting room. Nice concept, huh? I didn't come up with it. They did. They also know who's waiting for me and come panic and but, you know, there's always someone waiting for me. That's the bottom line. And how to deliver. That's Colleen, so I'm going to hand the clicker directly to Colleen, and away we go.
Actually, within your program right now, there'll be 2 videos back to back, in which you know they're a few minutes each in duration, where we actually talk about the various just clinical pearls about the how and the what in terms of delivery. And some of those they seem very basic, and this might be an opportunity when you're going through this program with your teams to even do a little bit of role play, and even, you know, a little bit of, you know, this worked well, this didn't work, and see what is going to fit for your group. And practicing, it is a skill. Some of the basic strategies include things like recognizing your patient and their families, their body language, how they're positioning. Are they introverted and withdrawn? Well, if they are, they're probably not someone that's going to take too kindly to being hugged and with you, within a few inches of their face. Or are they someone that's forward, they're opened up? Well, then you mirror that type of body position, and that helps you develop that rapport. You normalize and you validate their concerns, and you find mutual experiences that help you establish some of that rapport. Some of the what that is incredibly, I think, important is to, and I think many of us that have been in this situation, is to affirm that there is nothing this individual did that caused them to get this disease. Right? Because there's that agony sometimes in the back of their head, well, what if I didn't do this? Or what if it was this? But it's to provide that reassurance that there is nothing you did that caused this. And then it's to assure them that they have a professional team that is now going to be working with you. Like Angela said, you know, we say, you're going to Google this, and you're going to see some horrible things. But here are the facts, that this is a disease that is different in every individual, and we treat you as an individual. And it's working with you forward that's going to help us inform and decide what each of the steps is, and that you are the boss, and that you are the one to help direct that with us as a professional team. So after the diagnosis is given, and I got to click through there we go. This is, again, being aware of the room that you're in, the time that they might need. It's always good to have members of your team available to communicate and contact that person very quickly. We recommend within 24 hours, even if it's a phone call or touch base. We don't let them leave that room without something in hand that they can leave with that provides them with the knowledge that there is going to be follow-up. So whether it's their next clinic appointment, here's a website where you can go to get appropriate information. Here is some basic information. And so they know what the next plan is, that they don't feel that they're being sort of dropped off in this vast unknown. We want to be able to answer as many questions as they may have. but acknowledge that you are going to have questions, and it is normal to have questions, and you might feel overwhelmed right now, and it's hard to think of those. Keep a little notebook with you. Keep track of those. There's no silly question. Put them down, and then we'll go and bring it with you on your next visit, and we'll go through with that.
We're almost done, and we just figured out how to do this. We are very close to time, so I do not want to rush through these last few slides because these are critical for the majority of you in the room, because this is where we start kind of digging into the role of the allied health professional. So first of all, if you aren't already doing this in your clinic, and many years ago when I was running a clinic for Huntington's disease, we used to do weekly luncheons as a clinic team, and people would bring in whatever they wanted to bring in to eat, and we would talk about our lives and dogs and kids and home renovations and whatever it was. And it really created a sense of that heaviness that we dealt with every day in the clinic, whether it was working through diagnoses, working through people who were progressing quite intensely. It allowed us that opportunity to remind ourselves what a great team we were and that we were all individuals. So if you aren't already doing this, I really strongly encourage you to, go back to your teams. What can you do? Is it social events? You don't have to spend all your time together, but, is it dinner outings? Is it, bowling? I don't know what your thing is, but, something that really fosters those relationships that are outside of the deep kind of daily work that you do as clinicians. And the next thing, we have 2 videos, and one of them, actually they're both about 4 or 5 minutes long, but they really cover what we are terming the aftermath. And for those of you in the room who are the next steps folks, right? So they get the diagnosis, and maybe you're the person that follows up within 24 hours with a phone call. Maybe you're the person at your local association or chapter who does the home visit within a week. Maybe you're the DME provider who was tasked to bring out a power chair in a week or 2. This is absolutely part of that diagnosis because the time has passed, the experience has set in, the family has had time to have, some very clear up and down emotions, and this is often where the questions hit. You're doing a home visit, maybe you're evaluating for some home modification, maybe you're just doing a support visit, but this is often where the family questions, where the patient questions can come fast and furious. Okay, now we've sat with it, what's gonna happen to me? Am I gonna have this? What's happening? What do I tell my children? How do I understand my job next week? Can you help me apply for disability? So this aftermath can be incredibly intense for us as healthcare providers, as allied health professionals, and we spend some time in this video really talking about things to not only take care of yourself during this period, but kind of questions to be prepared to engage these families and these patients. What is it that we need to refer them to? Who do we need to make sure that they're also talking to during this kind of intense aftermath period? And then the last one... Oh, no, we're not going to watch that. So, don't like watch myself. So the last one is how we take this ALS spikes, which in a lot of ways has had some very clear and critical guidelines for that physician, for that neurologist around the actual diagnosis given, right? What we do in this video is we take this and we say, okay, all of the things we've been discussing certainly applies to you as allied health professionals, but this is where we really dig in deep. And we say, what advanced practice, what advanced preparation do you need to do, whether it's at that time of diagnosis, the day after, the week after, what kind of knowledge do you need? If you're going in to do that home modification, they've only been diagnosed for a week, but we know that they have been quite symptomatic for a long time. What kind of information do you need to be prepared for as you're going into that home? What kind of strategy, what emotions do we need to prepare ourselves for? So this is really, you know, I don't want to rush through this given the extraordinary population here of allied health professionals, but these last two slides are really, really critical, and they're really targeted just at you and the work that you do in that aftermath and in those hours and days and weeks following a diagnosis.
This way. Ah.
The ALS.
There we go. Thank you so much. As you can see, it was a challenge to fit a 90-minute program into a 60-minute delivery. And in terms of the take-home messages that this group wanted to leave you with, you can see them on the screen, that there are resources out there for you. There is so much built into this program. We really just scratched the surface today. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for questions, but everybody's sticking around. So from a content point of view, if you have questions about anything that Dr. Genge, Dr. Kavanaugh, or Dr. O'Connell said, feel free to talk to them independently. If you have any questions about how this is going to be available and where you can get access to it and so on, feel free to ask me. And we are going to leave with one more video.
Three comments. First of all, I really appreciate the comment that doctors should know thyself. When I was first diagnosed, the doctor was so uncomfortable. It felt to me like she had never given this diagnosis before. Her face was squished up, and she obviously did not want to be there. And when I went, I received really no information. She gave me an appointment, I think for in a month or so, and said we'll meet again. So I went for a second opinion, and this time I met Dr. Genge, and the experience was night and day. She really, first of all, the MD was so much less uncomfortable because she knew how to do the test without being a burden on the patient. And she also said to me, you have ALS, it's definite. But she has said two things that my wife and I latched on to. One was, I have patients who have had ALS for over 10 years, and that gave me some hope. And secondly, she said, we offer holistic care, and under my care, patients live longer. So even though we talk about 2 to 5 years, we can easily stretch that to 7 years. So hers was the message of hope. The second thing I think that was not mentioned in there was knowing first of all, preparing the patient for the critical meeting. When I went for my EMT, I was not told to come accompanied, so I went alone. In Canada in particular, it takes time to go through the test, so it feels like a routine process of elimination. But no one even told me that I was being sent to the ALS clinic. So preparing for the meeting, telling people what to expect is equally important. And finally, to reiterate the point that Albert made, is that knowing the patient is so important. When I was first diagnosed, the neurologist had no idea who I was, what my education level was, what my knowledge of ALS was. So, those are my 3 comments. But thank you very much for addressing this very important issue, because often it sets the stage for literally the rest of the patient's life. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our fantastic panel. As I said, because of the condensing of the program, we don't have a lot of time for questions. We don't have any time for questions. We used all our available time for the presentation, but feel free to approach them individually. And Sarah's going to come up and join us, I think.
Thank you so much, Kathy, Dr. Genge, Dr. Kavanaugh, Dr. O'Connell, Allison, Norman, thank you so much. Let's join in another round of applause. Yes, there is no time for questions.
You're afraid of us.
But you will be able to find them. We could get you guys special lanyards or something.
I do want to have one other thank you.
Okay.
I want to thank Mark Massey.
Yeah.
Because without him, this would not have happened. So, thank you, Mark.
So more questions for him as well.